This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Abam. We have an amazing topic this evening. Parshas Va'era. The Shiurim on Sefer Shemais are generously sponsored by our dear friends, Dr. Zakheim Umeshpachta, Lilo Nishmas, Reb Shloima Eliezer ben Harav Yaakov Zakheim, and Rivka Bas Tuvia Halevi, Began Eden to him and Uchasam. They should be Melitza Yisharm for their whole family, for Simchas Nachas, Gezint, Parnasa Berevach, Besurais Toivos, Ad Bias Koel Tzadek. So you know that Parshas Va'era is in what Sefer? Shemais. If you didn't get your Sefer on Shemais yet, it's available right here or on our site, rabbidg.com. Right now, the Avodas Hayom, we're working on the Haggadah Shel Pesach, and the due date is very fast approaching. Baruch Hashem, it should be with the lab Siyat Shema. If anybody would like to be Mishtatef, Tavay Aleichem Bracha. It's a very big avodah. There's an entire team that editors, layout, design. It's a very, very big and costly operation. So if anybody wants to be Mishtatef, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay. So, 2 weeks ago, I was in the country of Morocco. On the last day, I had the zchus to daven Shachris in the city of Sali by one of the kvarim of one of the great giants of Morocco. His name was Rabbi Rafael Hamalach Rafael. Rabbi Rafael Alan Kava. He's one of the most well-known Moroccan Gedolim. Say, hi, I never heard of him. That's how well known the Moroccan Gedolim are. One of the most well known is not so well known. Right here, we have a picture of him. If you want to see what he looks like, he was a Makubal and a great Paisik. And he was born in 1847. He passed away in 1935. I have a sefer that has pictures from his levaya. As Chus Tzedam and Shachris by the Kever. At the Shachris, I saw a 4-volume set of his Svarim, printed by Machon Ahavat Chaim of Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. Shailas Uchuvos, Karnei Re'im, Soyafos Re'im, Chadad V'Teima on Shas, Pa'amoin V'Rimoin, Pa'amoin Zahav, on Choshen Mishmar. He was a great Poisik and Lamdin. And at his kever, I saw a Chidush Noira V'Atzam, an amazing Chidush that he says, halachic Chidush, that is derived from this week's Parsha. Now, I wanted to get a hold, at the kever they had a 4-volume set. I remember I was very taken by the Chidush. I set it over at the kever, the Chidush, and yesterday preparing the Shiur, I wanted to get a hold of the Sefer. I wasn't sure how I'm going to get the Sefer. I mean, it was at the kever. I assumed Rabbi Yaakov Hillel made sure that at the kever the Sefer should be. I didn't think it's the kind of Sefer that's going to be, in Z. Berman's. I've been to Z. Berman's many times. Usually people come in when I'm there, do you have Mekrois Gedoyloi Shemais? Do you have Meselas Yesharim? Do you have the Art Scroll? And whenever they come in, I ask them the following question. Do you have Sefer Magid Rakia? No. Sometimes I ask them, especially if there's a pile over there, then it's easier. But how am I going to get the Sefer? So I went to Yitzhak Chachma, I put in Karnei Re'im, and I spelled Re'im, Reish, Aleph, and a Mem. Like, there's a parish on the Marsha, the Karnei Re'im. On the Marsha, there's sometimes a 1-line commentary, Karnei Re'im. In Yeshiva, I remember Karnei Re'im is the Marsha is very difficult to understand and to learn. The Karnei Re'im is the tiefest cheshbon on the Marsha. So I put in Reish, Aleph, Mem, nothing came up. I put in Ankava, Aleph, Nun, Kuf, Vav, Aleph. Nothing came up. So they don't have a sefer. I went to Hebrew books. They don't have any of his farm. I called Zundel Berman. Glatstein, what do you want? They know already. So I said, do you have the Svarim or Rafael Ankava? They have Karnei Re'im, but of a different person. I said, let me try Yitzhak Chachma one more time. Sure enough, Karnei Re'im was spelled Reish, Aleph, 2 streichels, regular mem. You never have a regular mem at the end of a word. But this sefer was spelled Reish, Aleph. So I got a hold of the tshuva. Here's the shaila. The shaila is like this. You guys are very young, but there's something called older people. Right? Older is when you become like 190 and up, right? That's older people. Until then, you're still young. Older people, they don't hear so well. There's a very interesting halacha. Let's go straight to halacha. Look at number 15. The halacha is when you daven Shemona Esrei, you're not allowed to daven in your heart. You can't just think the words, but you have to enunciate the words. Right? Enunciate means you have to move your lips. But umashmiya la'oznav belachash. You need to. Many people are not careful about this. They say words when they daven Shemona Esrei, but it's not loud enough that their own ear could hear it. You know what I'm saying? Many people, they daven belachash, but it's too belachash, because their own ear doesn't hear what they're saying. So the Shulchan Aruch says, your ear has to hear your words. I know a certain Adam Gadol that's very makbid, that his Shemona Esrei should be at least audible, that his own ear could hear it, but v'lo yashmi'a koiloi, no one else's ear should be able to hear it. So the guy next to you shouldn't hear it, but you should be able to hear it. If you can't have kavana, if it's so quiet, you're allowed to raise your voice, but that's when you're davening privately. But tzibur, you can't raise your voice, because you're going to disturb someone else. Fine. The Mishnah Berurah says that from the Zohar, it's mashma that you should say it quiet enough that your ear cannot hear it. And there are mikubalim that are makbid on the Zohar that it should be quiet enough that their ear should not hear. By the way, when you get an aliyah, it seems like it should be quiet enough that your ear can't hear it. People don't know that either. People are very makbid, it should be loud. So first of all, it's wrong. Second of all, it's disturbing in the Baal Koirei. But by aliyah, the Mishnah Berurah brings down, it should not be audible to your ear. But the Zohar seems to say by Shemona Esrei, likewise, it should not be audible to the ear. However, the Magen Avram says that the Zohar doesn't mean that. And the Gra says the Zohar doesn't mean that. And therefore, l'chadchila, Mishnah Berurah paskins, it needs to be loud enough that your ear could hear it. And I saw that even according to the Zohar, only if you're a full-fledged, certified, bona fide, card-carrying makubal. If you're just like a regular guy that like one time heard the word Zohar HaKadosh, you can't say, I follow the Zohar. Only like big-time mekubalim could say it quiet enough their ear can hear it. The bottom line is, halach l'maisa, you need to say it loud enough that your own ear could hear it. What if you don't say it loud enough that your ear could hear it? Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're still Yotzei. But l'chadchila is a very important halacha. So in other words, if you came tonight and the only thing you got is, my Shemona Esrei is really quiet, I can't hear myself, it's a very important adjustment to make, that your silent Shemona Esrei should not be so silent that your own ear can't hear it. Fine.
No, when you get in the lead, don't you say it out loud so that everybody can answer amen?
No. The reading the Kriyas HaTorah along. You're supposed to read along because technically you're making the bracha. You're the reader, so you have to read it. But at what decibel? That will be a topic for a different time. Okay, fine. Comes over Falan Kava. So you have the old guy. The old guy can't hear what he used to hear. The old guy, when he was a kid, he could hear. He could turn something on, and he could hear, and nobody else could hear. Now, the only way he could hear is if he davens a loud Shemona Esrei. Does he need to daven a loud Shemona Esrei because he really can't hear that well? And the only way for his ear to hear his own Shemona Esrei is to raise the volume. Says Rabbi Glatstein Kava, or Alan Kava, in Shaus Teshuvas Karnei Re'im, that I saw in the city of Sali in Morocco, that if you're old and you don't hear well, you need to daven Shemona Esrei out loud. And what's the proof? This week's Parsha. Gavaldik. This is Oyam V'Noira. He says it's a beferish Sifsei Chachamim this week's Parsha. He says by every Makkah, Pari said, stop! So Moshe said, don't worry. Vayeter al Hashem al daven. By the Tzvardeya, Moshe didn't say Vayeter. Moshe said, Vayitzak! I'm going to cry out. Why is Tzvardeya the only Makkah Moshe had to cry out? Says the Sifsei Chachamim, look at number 3, Makshim Ha'ilam, Lama Shina HaKosav B'Tzvardim Vayitzak Uveshar Makois, Vayeter Moshe. Says the Sivsei Chachamim, because the halacha is when you daven, your ear needs to be here. Your ear needs to hear. And what noise do Tzfardeya make? Azriel. What noise do Tzfardeya make? Anybody want to give it a try? A little louder.
Croaking.
The frogs make a loud noise. So Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't hear himself daven. So he had to scream out. Why? Because, says Sivsei Chachamim, since halach is when you daven, your ear must hear your tefillah, and Moshe couldn't hear himself daven because the frogs were making such loud noise. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to crank up the volume. Says Rafal Kava, we see from here, listen carefully, the decibel required for Shemana Esrei is not an objective decibel, it's subjective. So if you don't hear well, you got to crank up the volume. I mean, he didn't go to a telephone booth.
No, but I mean, it wasn't.
It wasn't a minion. It wasn't a minion.
So the halach is by is if you're davening yechid. It's not if you're a minion allowed. What?
Again, the guy. I mean, the question is: do you need to have to hear yourself, or does it have to be loud enough that it could be heard if you were able to hear? I hear you're saying that maybe it's only a raya if you're by yourself. You're allowed to do this. Therefore,
you don't want to disturb the person next to you.
Yeah, but I got to be Yotzei Shemana Esrei, so maybe he should get earplugs. I don't know. Then he can't daven. Get I'm sure they have earplugs that only block out the sound of other people. I think I know certain kids that have earplugs like that. They only blocks out selective sound, right? But the Sifsei Chachamim is saying that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was soak by the Tzfardeya is because of the halacha that someone who davens has to be able to hear themselves daven. Therefore, Paskins Shal Shuvas Kan remember Rafal Alan Kava, based on Sifsei Chachamim, someone who is hard of hearing needs to daven a louder Shemona Esrei. Now this troubled me greatly, and I wasn't sure why. And maybe an hour ago I realized, what's the halacha if you're davening Shemona Esrei and an ambulance passes by, fire truck, you can't hear yourself daven. You're not hearing yourself. So then what? You have to stop, or you have to scream. That if there's background noise, you gotta daven at a different decibel, but that's what it would come out according to Rabbi Rafal Kava, that the decibel required for Shemona Esrei is not an objective sound, it's subjective. But last night, I found another support for Rabbi Rafal Kava, the Sefer Makar Chayim. What's the Makar Chayim? Makar Chayim was written by the Chavos Yair. Now, this is a Sefer that's also very hard to get. I also called Zundel Berman. They didn't have it. It's not on Otzar Chachma. It's not on Hebrew books. So I figured I'll call S.K. Gross, because he's a descendant of Rabbi Yair Bachrach. Maybe he has it. And he said, actually, they just wrote an article that Rabbi Yair Bachrach wrote this Sefer, but it's not well known that he wrote the Sefer. So I was up, but I found they asked Rabbi Yashiv, if someone is hard of hearing, do they need to daven louder so that their ear could hear it? Yes. And Rabbi Yashiv quoted the Makar Chayim, Rabbi Yair Bachrach, that the decibel required for tefillah is subjective, and therefore if somebody is old, they have to daven louder. And I asked Rabbi Yair Bachrach, and he said, V'kach have, when I was older, I started to daven a louder Shemona Esrei. And Reb Ben Sion Cook said, he asked Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv said, yes, if you're older and you don't hear well, you must daven louder so that your ear could hear, because the decibel required is not objective, it is subjective. But this did not sit well with me. And I saw that some poskim disagree. Chazon Ish is mesupik about this. Chazon Ish is mesupik whether the decibel required for Shemona Esrei is an objective standard. In other words, you have to reach this volume, and if you reach it, whether you hear it or not, you're yotzei. Or is it subjective? Do you have to actually hear it? Again, it would come out, a chidush, that according to Rafal Kava and Rabbi Yashiv and the Makar Chayim. If you're davening Shema and an ambulance passes by, or the alarm rings, you're davening in yeshiva, and the bell rings, you got to pause. Whoever heard of such a thing? Whoever heard of such a thing?
Why do you have to hear your davening? Hashem has to hear it.
So now the question is, why should you have to hear it? You're not davening to yourself. You're davening to God, and God could hear it. He could say, He could decipher. That's the earthquake, that's the bell, that's the ambulance, and this is the guy's tefillah.
No matter how many frogs there are.
Doesn't matter how many frogs. But it seems like you have to hear it. And, by the way, the Shulchan Aruch Harav writes that when you're davening, it should not be loud enough that somebody 4 amos away could hear. That sounds like that there's an objective decibel that you can't daven. In other words, the Shulchan Aruch Harav doesn't say don't daven loud enough that a guy next to you could hear. If he's 10 miles away, he shouldn't be able to hear. If he's right in your face, he shouldn't be able to hear. No, there's an objective decibel that someone 4 amos away should not be able to hear. So does that mean the Shulchan Aruch Harav argues on Rabbi Glatstein and Kava, and he holds that there's an objective decibel? It could be there's an objective decibel that's too loud. But if it's quiet, you still have to subjectively be able to hear it yourself. The Shari Tshuva brings a shaila. Let's say you have a guy who's hard of hearing, and he's laying in the Megillah. Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh. Yeah, right now we've officially kicked it off. There's, we invoked Megillah Esther. The guy himself can hear it, but everyone else in the kehillah can hear it. So he's not deaf. If he would be deaf, he can't be moitzi anyone because he's not chayiv. But let's say he's hard of hearing. He can't hear himself lane, but everybody else could hear him lane. The Shari Tshuva writes that everybody is yotzei. So some poskim want to prove from the Shari Tshuva that the Shari Tshuva holds not like Rabbi Glatstein Kava, that the decibel is objective. I would say it's not a raya at all, because everybody agrees, even those who hold that subjectively you should hear it, if you don't hear it, you're still yotzei. So it's not a raya, the fact that he says everyone is yotzei, that it's an objective decibel. It could be it's subjective, but you're yotzei anyway. Bottom line is, the Sefer Ma'ar Oiz says, Reb Chaim Kanievsky was asked the shaila, and Reb Chaim said, not like Rabbi Glatstein Kava, not like Rabbi Yashiv, not like the Makar Chayim, the decibel is objective. It has to be loud enough that under normal circumstances, with normal hearing, you could hear it. Whether you hear it or not is not critical. That's what I thought. Even though it seems like most poskim say not like that. Most poskim say like Rabbi Glatstein Kava, that it's subjective. Now, what's the machlokes based on? You ready for the lamdus? Why do you need to be able to hear yourself talking? Is it a siman or is it a siba? Let's see if we could say this coherently. Is it that you are required to enunciate the words? And if you don't produce sound, it could be you're not enunciating the words. You're just moving your mouth like that, but if you don't actually produce the sound, you might not be enunciating correctly. If that's the case, you don't have to hear it. As long as you make the sound, you've enunciated the word, irrespective of whether you heard it or not. Meaning, if the purpose of producing the sound is to enunciate it accurately, it doesn't matter if you actually hear it. Or you could say, why you have to produce the sound? Because it's only considered dibur if you could hear it. If you can't hear it, maybe it's not dibur. Maybe sound that you don't hear is not called talking. If I'm making noise and I myself can't hear it, maybe that's not called talking. Or do we say, it is called talking, it's just there's background noise, or it's just that my ear is not picking up the decibel. That's the machlokes between Rabbi Glatstein Kava and Rabbi Yashiv and the Makar Chaim that say you're not yotzei, and the Shita of Chaim Kanievsky that you're yotzei. So what's the $1 million question? Rabbi Glatstein Kava brought a proof from the frogs. He said, I'll prove to you that you yourself must be able to hear the Tefillah, because why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to scream out by the frogs? Why did he scream out? It must be because if there's background noise, you're not going to be yotzei unless you say it loudly. So according to, listen carefully, according to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, that you don't have to hear yourself daven. It just has to be loud enough that you could have heard yourself had you had good hearing, or had there not been background noise. Then why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to scream out by the frogs? He could have just said it regularly, and he could have been yotzei according to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Meaning, according to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, according to the Psak, meaning Rafal Kava is proving from Vayitzaku that you have to actually hear your own tefillah. But according to Reb Chaim, that you don't have to hear your tefillah. Why did Moshe scream? Good question, right? That's the Sifsei Chachamim. By the way, the Sifsei Chachamim paskins, you have to hear yourself davening. So I came across an amazing approach to this very question from a Kadmoin, the Beis Elikim. The Beis Elikim was written by Rav Moshe Matrani, the Mabit. Mabit was a contemporary of the Arizal. And the Mabit is buried right next to the Ari. He wrote a Sefer Beis Elikim on Tefillah, Tshuva, and Yesodei HaTorah. And the Beis Elikim is struggling to answer the following contradiction. There was a woman by the name of Chana, and Eli saw she was davening, and it says, "Rak sifaseh hanois v'kailoi lo sishma." Her lips were moving; nobody could hear her sound. So, what do we learn from there? You're supposed to daven quietly. The Gemara says, "Someone who davens loud, he's miktane amana." It's like he doesn't have emunah, like what God can't hear him. Do you hear me? What are you screaming? Hashem is shoymea lachash. V'chol ma'aminim shehu shoymea lachash. In fact, the Gemara says someone who davens loudly is a false prophet.
Well, why do they use the proof from Chana? So she was davening to herself. I mean, so that's the proof that
we learn out from there, right? The Gemara learns out from Chana's practice that that's the correct way to daven. Even though Eli thought she was drunk.
She was drunk, right?
So the question: why did Eli didn't know the halacha? So we're gonna answer that in a moment. In other words, what Chana made up this new din, but before Chana, everyone was like, "Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu." Really? What'd you do? The guy in the back asked. Really? What'd you do? You know? And the other guy says, "You know what he did, you know." But what Chana invented the halacha that you have to daven quietly, we'll see in a minute.
Chana did it because of sneers.
What?
A woman should not be saying it loud.
What? But
Tell that to your wife.
so on the one hand, we find Chana daven quietly, and on the other hand, we find throughout Tanakh many tza'akos. Mordechai vayitzak. Once we start. So the question is, when do you daven loudly? When do you daven quietly? So the Mabit says a davar nifla ad ma'id. Regular tefillos that are part of the Seder Hayoim, Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, that are not be'is tzara, it is not worthy to say it out loud. You could be mechavein when you say it quietly. So therefore, Shemona Esrei, regular tefillos, you should not daven out loud. However, when you daven be'is hatzar or be'is tzara, the guy somebody is in pain, he has a need, he has a tzorach, he's davening for Yeshua. Quiet down, keep calm. When you keep calm, it hurts, I'm in pain, I need something. Then you're supposed to daven out loud to show your margish the tsar, and you feel the only one who can help you is Ribbono Shel Olam. Says the Mabit, that's why Moshe was tzarek by the tzfardim, because Paro said, "Get these frogs out of here. If you get them out of here, I'll send you out of Egypt." That was the first time Paro agreed that he would send us out. Until then, Paro just said, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." This time he said, "Stop it, I'll let you go free." So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "This is an Eis Tzara. If we don't take advantage now, maybe he'll never let us go." So Moshe Rabbeinu was tzak. Why? Be'eis Tzara, you're supposed to scream out. That's why when Miriam had saras, Vayitzak Moshe, Kel na Rafana Allah. You hear, Pliny ben Pliny is a chayla mesukan. Oh, Shir Hamalais, Imama Ken Wake up! Well, did you hear what somebody's suffering? You should feel a little pain. You know, when you, the other day I touched something very hot, and for whatever, it was unplugged, but I thought it wasn't, it hurt! So it hurt. Ouch. No. You don't balachash, say ouch. If it hurts, you say ouch with B'kol Ram.
How do we know what Shemona Esrei?
What?
How do you know what this Akbar was on Shemona Esrei?
By what? We don't know that it was a Shemona Esrei, but it sounds like it was a Tefilla. What kind of Tefilla? It was a Stam. By the way, any Tefilla should not be. Every Tefilla should be balachash. No, it's across the board. It's across the board. Now, likewise, the Mabit says all the tza'akos throughout Tanakh we find in Yuma. By Ezra was tza'ak. Every za'aka, every tza'aka. Nusach Sfard says in Hoidu on Erev Shabbos about the 4 people in the desert, across the Yam. Vayitzaku al Hashem, vayizaku. Why? It's be'ez tzara. Mi mitzukoiseim yatzileim. So the Mabit sets forth the following great principle. When you daven regular tefillos, the everyday, the shachris, the mincha, the mariv, it should not be b'koyol ram. On the other hand, if it's a tefillah be'ez tzara, that's when vayitzaku. What's an example of tefillah be'ez tzara? By tzfardeya. So the Mabit is answering Rabbi Falan Kava's kasha. The Sifsei Chachamim's kasha. Rabbi Falan Kava, the Sifsei Chachamim wanted to prove from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was tza'ak. Why was he tza'ak? It's because you need to be able to hear yourself daven. The Mabit would say, no, maybe Reb Chaim Kanievsky is correct. Maybe even with background noise, you don't have to elevate the volume of your tefillah. So why was Moshe tza'ak? Stam, it's tefillah be'ez tzara. Now there's an amazing Pele Yoetz. I have inside scoop that ArtScroll just came out with English translation on Bitachon, I think from the Alter of Nevardik. Next to come out is Pele Yoetz in English. Pele Yoetz writes, how great is the power of tza'aka. By the Arba Tzrichim L'Hoidos, it says, Vayitzaku el Hashem, Batzar lohem imetzukoseim yatzileim. Tza'aka implies that you raise your voice and you cry out from the depths of your heart. The only thing is, says the Pele Yoetz, this differentiation of the Mabit, he doesn't quote the Mabit by name, to say that regularly you daven quietly, and be'isar you daven out loud, he says, Halev mahases b'davar. The heart is not confident about this differentiation that every time a person is in tsar, they should scream out. In other words, from the Mabit it would sound like if someone has a problem, you go into your office, you go into your bedroom, and you shred, Ribbono Shel Olam, help me! I mean, we do that even in shul, by Ana Hashem Hashiana, you don't say, Ana Hashem Hashiana, Ana Hashem Hatzlichana. I mean, what is it? Pal, are you alive? We scream it out, we're tzak. But the Pele Yoetz says, I'm not confident that every time a person has a problem, you're allowed to just scream out. The Zohar says that someone who screams out their tefillah, in tefillah say nishmas. And Chazal say that Chana daven quietly, and she was be'ez tzara. Therefore, says the Pele Yoetz, a davar oyoim v'noira. Not every time a person is in tsar should they scream out. Listen to this. Says the Pele Yoetz, the best thing is, says the Pele Yoetz, something very interesting, that when a person is in tsar, Beliba in your heart, Yitzhak Tza'aka Gedoyla, in your heart you should scream out, but the decibel should be low. You hear this? The Pele Yoetz says when a person has a tzara, scream out, Beliba! But But if you're burning inside and you're pained inside and you can't contain it, then let it all out. And then you could scream it out. So it depends on the level of the pain. Tza'aka, says the Peleiotes, doesn't necessarily mean loud decibel. Your heart should scream out, but it doesn't mean the volume should be so loud that everyone could hear. So Rabbi is saying that an amazing parallel to this is a comment of the Chida, number 13. Chida is bothered that we know you're supposed to answer Amen Hishmei Rabba b'chol koichai uv'kol kavanasai. We know with all your focus, we know what all your focus means, but what does it mean with all your strength? So simply it means say it as loud as you can. Were you ever in a show where a guy literally said Amen Hishmei Rabba as loud as he can? No, not loud. Anybody want to try? Were you ever in a show where a guy screamed Yehei Shmei like he would be a color war general? Not like in camp a little bit, like mamish. Yeah? By your minion over there in the... Landau. Yeah, by Landau. So what happened? They carried him out, they tied him to a straitjacket, they gave him medication. What? They gave him the Amud. They gave him the Amud. In most places, if they would do that, he'd be locked up.
He wouldn't be come back a second time.
You know? So the question is, but that's what the Gemara says, you should say b'chol koichai. So it's such a genius idea of the Chida. Chida says if you actually say Amen Yishai with all your strength, it could be you'll be punished because people are going to be laughing at you. And it's gaiva. But the Gemara says all your strength. Says the Chida, Yarei Shamayim, you ready for this? But I think it's slightly different than Peleiotes. Peleiotes says, in your heart it should be b'chol koichai. The Chida says, rev yourself up as if you're going to answer Amen Yishmei Rabba as loud as you can. And then when it comes down to it, it should be just a regular voice. So maybe you could say the same thing with Tza'aka. If somebody has a tzara, rev yourself up to say it as loud as you can, but doesn't mean you have to actually say it on that decibel. Again, the Paleoid says if you can't contain it, then you let it out. But this would be an alternative to Rebbe Falan Kava. He proves from the frogs, you got to hear yourself. No, there's a concept of Tfilas Tza'aka. Now I want to end off with one more very interesting halachic inyan. I was very interested by this. So you're standing next to the old guy, and he's saying, Slach lanu avinu ki chatan. He's clapping himself like, bang, you know. Mechal lanu ki moichel v'soileach ota baruch ata Hashem. Chanun hamar b'lesloyach. And the guy's annoying you, you know. Amen! Are you know, you're supposed to answer Amen. If you could hear the guy davening Shemona Esrei, you finished earlier, or the guy's lagging behind. Do you answer Amen to a guy stiller Shemona Esrei? Interesting shaila. You would say, yeah, right? Says Reb Shlomo Kluger in the Chachma Shloima, Siman Kuf Chav Daled. What does Amen stand for? Kel Melech Ne'eman. Yeah, that's what I would have thought. That's what the Gemara says in Shabbos Kuf Yutes. The Yalkut Shemoini says that Amen stands for Ata Melech Rachaman. Ata Melech Ne'eman. Not God is a trustworthy king. You are a trustworthy king. What's an afkamina? We know when a person davens a silent Shemona Esrei, Hashem is standing right there. When you're davening out loud, then it's like you're talking about Hashem. This is what he writes. Could you answer Amen to someone's silent Shemona Esrei? You can't say Keil Melech Ne'eman if someone's davening a silent Shemona Esrei, but the Rebbeinu Shem is right there. You can't talk about Hashem if Hashem's right in front of you. So the Manda Amar that holds you could answer Amen because he holds that Amen could also stand for Ata Melech Ne'eman. So it's appropriate to answer Amen even if someone is davening the silent Shemona Esrei. On the other hand, those poskim that say you should not answer Amen, they hold Amen only means Keil Melech Ne'eman. Bottom line is, regarding this shaila, should you answer Amen to someone's silent Shemona Esrei? Comes Reb Shmuel Halevi Vosner, the Shevet Halevi, Chelek Gimel Siman Tesvav, and he says you're not allowed to answer Amen. Why? You only answer Amen to a bracha that's allowed to be said. but you have no business hearing his bracha. He's not supposed to be saying it out loud. Someone who says it out loud is Miktane Amana, is from the Nevi'ei Sheker. By the way, it sounds like the Shevet HaLevi doesn't hold like Reb Rafal Kava. Because he says, this guy has no business saying it out loud. What do you mean? According to Reb Rafal Kava and Reb Yashiv, he can say it out loud. No, there's no saying it out loud. Says Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, you're not to answer Amen. Why? First he says, because the person is saying the bracha shaloi kedin, so you shouldn't answer Amen. And says Reb Shlomo Zalman, even if he should be saying it out loud, meaning, let's say he can't hear well or he doesn't know, says Reb Shlomo Zalman a beautiful svara. Chazal were never masakein Amen to the silent Shemona Esrei. Amen is a takanas Chazal. They're masakin Amen to a bracha said out loud. They were not masakin Amen to a silent bracha. This guy happens to be hard of hearing. Good. Chazal, the rabbis never made an Amen for such a bracha. They asked Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv said, do you make a bracha, do you say Amen when you hear someone say Boi Pri Adama? So why not on Roifei Chorei Amo Yisrael? By the way, this fits well in Rabbi Yashiv's personal shita, who Rabbi Yashiv said, if you can't hear well, you say it a little bit louder. They asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky, should you answer Amen to someone silent Shemona Esrei? Yes. In the Mate Ephraim, okay, one second. They asked Rabbi Vadia, Yabi Omer Chelek Ches Siman Yod. Rabbi Vadia said, you have to answer Amen. If you're middle of Psukkah de Zimra, you could be mafsik. However, if you want to find a different seat, and this way you don't have to worry about this issue of the guy davening Shemona Esrei, and you have to answer Amen, you could move your seat. There's a Perush on the Mate Ephraim called Elef Hamagen. He says this is a great dilemma. What should you do if a guy is davening the sound Shemona Esrei you could hear? By the way, Rav Shlomo Zalman said he remembers his Rebbe, Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer, was clearing the Shaila because in Kletsk there was an old man who couldn't hear himself. He was davening very loud, and the boys wanted to chepa him. So in the middle of his Shemona Esrei, they said, Amen! Amen! And Rav Isser Zalman then thought, well, are you allowed to answer me? Maybe you're not allowed to answer Amen to the silent Shemona Esrei. Rav Shlomo Zalman paskind no. Shevet HaLevi paskind no. Rabbi Yashiv paskind yes. The Yabi Omer Rabbi Vadia paskind yes. Says the Olaf Amogen, it's a great dilemma. Listen carefully. What's the dilemma? On the one hand, there's a chumrah. If you don't answer Amen, you're being mevatel answering Amen. If you do answer Amen, it might be something called Amen levatala. Let's say, you hear a Gentile say Boi Pri Adama. You don't say Amen. It's Amen levatala. You can't answer Amen. So how could you answer Amen to a bracha of the sound Shemona Esrei? Listen carefully. Says the Elef Hamagen that on Yomim Noiraim, the Shulchan Aruch says that in order to enhance Kavanah, you're allowed to daven a little bit of a louder Shemona Esrei. So since some poiskim say you're allowed to daven loudly, and it wouldn't therefore be an Amen Levatala, so now you have a dilemma. Should I not say Amen? Well, I'm being Mevatel Amen. Should I answer Amen? But it might be Amen Levatala. So I'll answer Amen and rely on the poskim that say that during Yom Naram, you could make the bracha a little bit out loud. So let's just point out, you could apply the same thing even to the regular Shemona Esrei and say that if the guy is a little bit older, and some poskim, namely Reb Rafal Kava and Reb Yashiv and the Makar Chayim, they say that if you're a little bit hard of hearing, you could down a little bit louder, you could be soymech on those shitos, definitely, and answer Amen to such a bracha. But the bottom line is that we're very grateful to the frogs, because the frogs teach us one of two very important halachas. Either Reb Rafal Kava says, we see that this is the only time Moshe was tza'ak, so this highlights the halacha, you must hear your own Shemona Esrei. In other words, you walk out of here, halacha l'maisa. When you daven Shemona Esrei, you need to hear yourself say the words. If you're hard of hearing, Rabbi Rafal Kava says daven a little bit louder. However, the Mabit said there's a different reason Moshe Rabbeinu was tzak by the Tzvardeya, because this is called Tefilla be'es tzara. There's a geder of Tefilla be'es tzara. So if, Rabbi say, if there's a particular thing that a person needs, there's the regular Shemana Esrei that a person should avail themselves of, but a person should also avail themselves of the kayach of tza'aka, which according to the Mabit means you go into a room and you scream out to Hashem. Breslov is very into unadulterated, real tza'aka. You go into the forest and you scream on top of your lungs. Great. However, the Peliyoetz is not clear that you could just scream any time. So the Peliyoetz says like this: you should scream, your heart should scream. Let the decibel remain regular. And if you're still in such pain, then you could even let out a very loud sound. We brought from the Chidah an idea that if you prepare yourself as if you would be raising the decibel, then even if you don't actually raise the decibel, that's also begeder tza'aka. May all of our tefillos be neskabel, barach v'ratzon. Have a wonderful night. Rabbi Chanani ben Akasha Omer. Ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu Zakas Yisrael. Lefikach Chiblam Torah Mitzvah Shenemer. Ado Inoi Chafetz Man Tzkikai Yagdil Torah V'Yadiyah. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.